The grand throne room of the Veskar Palace was silent, except for the faint hum of the great energy shields that protected the city. King Zorath sat on the high throne, his scaled hands resting on the cold armrests. Once, this place had been filled with music, laughter, and the sound of his people celebrating victories. Now, the air felt heavy with loss. Banners of faded red and gold hung along the walls, their colors dulled by time and sorrow. He stared at the holographic map in front of him. Red markers, enemy fleets, were spreading across the galaxy like a sickness. Blue markers, his own fleets, were few, scattered, and shrinking with every passing month. The war with the Syndrax Federation had been going on for over 30 years, and each year took more than it gave. The king's eyes drifted toward a small emblem hanging from his belt, a silver crest that once belonged to his daughter, Princess Liara. She had given it to him before leaving for the front lines 7 years ago. She was only 23 at the time, young but determined, her voice steady when she promised she would return with victory. But victory never came. Messages from her. Unit stopped 3 months ago. The Royal Council told him to prepare for the worst, but he refused to hold a funeral without proof. Still, every night, he sat in the empty dining hall waiting for news. The sound of heavy doors opening pulled him from his thoughts. Minister Varric, a tall, thin alien with blue skin and sharp eyes, stepped into the throne room. "Your Majesty," he said with a bow, "an unidentified vessel is approaching the capital's defense perimeter." The king frowned. "Enemy? Unknown. Its transponder code does not match any known Syndrax signal. It's old, human design." The king leaned forward slightly. "Human? They rarely travel this far." "Shall we intercept?" Varric asked. The king waved his hand tiredly. "Send the standard warning. If they ignore it, disable their engines." The minister nodded and left, his footsteps echoing through the hall. The king leaned back again, trying to push away the thought. Humans were unpredictable. And in the middle of a war, unpredictability was dangerous. Hours later, the palace received word. The mysterious ship had docked in the royal spaceport under escort. The king did not bother to stand. Another merchant, perhaps, or a mercenary hoping to profit from the war. He had no time for strangers, but then the palace communicator came alive with an urgent voice. "Your Majesty, you need to come to the docking bay immediately." He almost told them to handle it themselves, but something in the tone of the guard's voice made him pause. The docking bay was vast, a place built to hold entire warships. Now it was dim and quiet, with only a few maintenance drones gliding along the walls. A small vessel rested on the landing pad, its hull scorched and pitted from battles. And then he saw her. Princess Liara stepped down the ramp, her once bright armor dented and scratched, her long dark hair tied back. Her eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, the weight of years seemed to vanish from the king's shoulders. "Liara." His voice was barely a whisper. She smiled, but it was a tired smile, the kind carried by soldiers who had seen too much. "Father." But before he could step forward, his eyes caught the figure behind her. A human male followed her down the ramp. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried himself like a soldier. His dark uniform was simple, but marked with patches. The king did not recognize. A large energy rifle hung at his side, not in a threatening way, but ready if needed. The Veskar guards stiffened instantly, their hands moving toward their weapons. The human scanned the bay calmly, his gaze sharp, as if measuring every possible threat. "Who is this?" the king asked, his tone low. "This is Captain Aaron Hale," Liara said firmly. "He saved my life. More than once." The king's eyes narrowed. "A human?" "Yes," Liara replied, stepping slightly in front of Aaron. "Without him, I would not be here." Minister Varric moved closer to the king, whispering sharply, Your Majesty, we should detain him. Humans are enough, the king said, raising a hand. His gaze remained fixed on the stranger. Aaron stepped forward, stopping a respectful distance away. Your Majesty, he said, his voice steady. I am not here as an enemy. Your daughter and I fought together behind enemy lines. We made it back. But it was not easy. The king studied him in silence. Humans had a reputation. Brave, reckless, and often impossible to control. But there was something in the man's eyes. Determination, and no hint of fear. How did you find your way here? The king asked. We had no choice, Aaron replied. The Syndrax will strike this system soon. You need to know what we've seen and what we've learned. The king's chest tightened at the words. He wanted nothing more than to hold his daughter and keep her safe, but the shadow of war loomed over every moment. Come, the king said finally, both of you. You will tell me everything. As they walked toward the palace, whispers spread among the guards. The princess had returned after years of silence, and with her was a human. Some saw hope, others saw danger. But for the first time in years, King Zorath felt something he had almost forgotten. A reason to believe his people might yet survive. The palace halls were quieter than Liara remembered. Once, these corridors had been alive with the sound of advisors rushing to meetings, guards laughing at their posts, and servants moving between chambers. Now the walls seemed to echo with emptiness. She walked beside her father, feeling the weight of every step. Aaron followed close behind, his eyes scanning the alien architecture. Curved walls of polished stone, glowing threads of energy running like veins through the surfaces, and towering statues of Veskar warriors from centuries past. He noticed the way the guards watched him, their hands hovering near their weapons. He was no stranger to suspicion. When they reached the war chamber, the massive doors slid open with a deep hum. Inside, a circular table projected a holographic galaxy map. Red lights pulsed across Veskar territory, showing the advance of the Syndrax Federation. The ministers were already gathered, their colorful robes a sharp contrast to the grim expressions on their faces. Minister Varric was the first to speak. Your Majesty, before we begin, I must insist that the human be removed from the chamber. Liara's eyes narrowed. He stays. Princess, Varric said sharply, you have been gone for years. You may not understand the political risks of allowing an outsider into our most secure meetings. Aaron kept silent, standing still, letting Liara handle it. King Zorath looked at Varric with a tired but firm expression. If he fought beside my daughter, then he will be heard. That silenced the ministers for the moment. They took their seats, and the king gestured for Liara to speak. 3 months ago, Liara began, my unit was ordered to intercept a Syndrax supply convoy near the Adrel system. It was supposed to be an easy strike, but we were ambushed. The Syndrax knew our every move. Someone had leaked our mission. The ministers exchanged uneasy glances. Half our ships were destroyed in the first wave, she continued. We were forced to retreat into uncharted space. That's when we were attacked again. Boarding parties, close combat. I was injured. Her voice tightened slightly. That's when I met Aaron. His team of human mercenaries was operating in the area, hunting Syndrax raiders. They saved my squad, treated our wounded, and helped us escape pursuit. Aaron finally stepped forward. Your daughter's forces were exhausted. They were being hunted, but the Syndrax didn't know humans were in the sector. We used that advantage to move through their territory unnoticed. Mercenaries, one of the older ministers said coldly, fighting only for payment. Aaron shook his head. Not this time. We weren't hired. We were there because the Syndrax have been raiding human colonies too. We had a common enemy. King? Zorath leaned forward. And how did you make it back here? The Syndrax hold the entire corridor to Veskar space. Aaron's voice was calm, but his words were sharp. By thinking differently than your enemies. They expect you to fight them on open terms, ship against ship. We didn't do that. We moved in small groups, struck their fuel depots, sabotaged their sensors, and made them chase ghosts. A murmur ran through the room. Liara spoke again. We also captured a Syndrax command officer. From him, we learned that they are planning a direct strike on Veskar Prime within the next cycle. Their fleet will be larger than anything we've faced in years. That made the chamber fall silent. Minister Varric spoke first, his voice low but tense. If this is true, then our defenses will not hold. We barely have half the fleet we need. The king's eyes turned to Aaron. And you came here to warn us? Warn you, Aaron said, and help you. Help? Varric scoffed. One human ship against the Syndrax fleet? Aaron allowed himself a small smile. One human with the right plan can be worth more than a dozen ships. That earned a few scowls from the ministers, but Liara noticed the king's expression change. Just slightly. Zorath tapped the table, bringing up the holographic map. Show me what you propose. Aaron stepped closer. The Syndrax have a pattern. They move their fleets along predictable supply lines. They'll enter your system here. He pointed to a glowing red corridor. Because they believe your forces are retreating toward the capital. If we can make them believe you're weaker than you are, they'll commit fully to that path. And then, the king asked. Then we close the trap. There's an asteroid belt here, Aaron said, pointing again. Narrow passes. Perfect for an ambush. Hide mines along the belt. Force their largest ships into the kill zone and strike from multiple angles before they can escape. Varric shook his head. This is reckless. One mistake and we lose everything. One mistake, Aaron said, and you lose everything anyway. The difference is, my plan gives you a chance. The room fell into silence again. The king's gaze shifted from the human to his daughter. And you trust him? Without hesitation, Liara nodded. With my life. Zorath sat back, his claws tapping lightly on the table. Very well. I will consider it. The meeting ended soon after, the ministers filing out with mixed expressions, some worried, some angry, a few thoughtful. As they walked through the halls again, the king finally spoke to Aaron directly. My people will not trust you easily. They have reasons. I don't need their trust, Aaron replied. I just need a chance to prove myself. The king gave a slow nod. We'll see. Liara glanced at Aaron as they walked. She had seen him fight in impossible conditions, survive in enemy territory with nothing but scraps, and make decisions that saved lives. But convincing the Veskar court might be harder than any battle. When they reached the guest quarters, the king stopped. Rest. Tomorrow, we decide our course. Aaron bowed his head slightly, and Liara followed her father out into the corridor. The war had brought them back to the same place, but it was clear the real fight was only beginning. The next morning, the palace was busier than it had been in years. Messengers hurried down long corridors, their hands full of data pads. Guards moved with purpose, shifting patrol routes. Engineers from the royal shipyards were summoned to the war chamber. The news of a possible direct Syndrax attack had spread quickly, and it was now the center of every conversation. Princess Liara stood on one of the palace balconies looking out over the capital city. The view was beautiful. Tall crystal spires, glowing in the morning light, bridges that seemed to float between buildings, and streams of air traffic weaving through the sky. But beneath that beauty, she saw signs of worry. Civilians moved quickly, avoiding gatherings. Markets were quieter. Even the children's laughter seemed less frequent. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to see Aaron. He wore the same dark uniform from yesterday, but it had been cleaned. He carried a small device in his hand, projecting a rotating image of the asteroid belt he had mentioned in the war meeting. "You're still working on the plan?" she said. "Can't afford not to," Aaron replied, glancing at the city. "If the Syndrax take this world, the rest of the Veskar Empire will fall. and your father knows it." "The ministers don't," she said, crossing her arms. "Some of them would rather surrender territory than fight alongside you." Aaron looked at her. "Then we don't give them a choice. We make the plan work so well they can't argue." Before she could reply, a palace guard appeared. "Princess Liara, the council is gathering. Your presence is requested." They followed the guard to the war chamber. This time, the map of the galaxy had been replaced with a close-up of Veskar, Prime, and the surrounding systems. King Zorath stood at the head of the table, his expression serious. The enemy fleet was spotted in the Orath sector. The king began. 3 days from our borders. They are moving fast." Minister Varric leaned forward. "We still have time to strengthen the capital's shields and prepare for a defensive siege." "A siege will fail," Liara said sharply. "Once they surround the planet, no one gets in or out. They'll starve the city before the month ends." Varric gave her a thin smile. "And your solution is to follow the humans' reckless plan?" "My solution," Liara replied, "is to stop the Syndrax before they reach us." The king raised a hand, silencing them both. "I have considered the risks. I have also considered our options. Captain Hale's plan will be tested." Several ministers began speaking at once, but the king's voice cut through the noise. "We do not have the luxury of tradition right now. The human will have limited command authority for this operation. Liara will oversee it alongside him." Aaron gave a small nod, acknowledging the decision. The next hours were spent in planning. Aaron explained every detail of the ambush, the placement of the mines, the positioning of the Veskar ships, the timing of the attack. He adjusted the plan as Veskar generals pointed out strengths and weaknesses in their fleet. His calm confidence didn't waver even when faced with open doubt. At one point, an older general asked, "Human, why do you care if our world falls? Your kind has its own battles." Aaron looked him in the eye. "Because I've seen what the Syndrax do to conquered worlds. Trust me, you don't want to find out." The room fell silent at his tone. By the time the meeting ended, the plan was approved, but only barely. The operation would begin in 2 days. That night, Liara found her father alone in the royal gardens. He stood beneath the great flame trees, their glowing leaves swaying in the wind. "You're taking a risk," she said softly. "Every decision in war is a risk," Zorath replied. "But I have watched that human. He thinks differently, and he has given you something I could not, a way home." Liara looked at the ground, feeling the weight of his words. The following day was spent in preparation. Veskar ships left the capital one by one, moving to the hidden coordinates of the asteroid belt. Engineers worked in shifts to install cloaking fields around the mines. Stealth scouts were sent ahead to track the Syndrax fleet's exact movements. Aaron moved among the crews, checking each step personally. He didn't order them around like a commander. Instead, he asked questions, listened to their concerns, and made adjustments where needed. Slowly, some of the Veskar soldiers began to relax around him. In the evening, he found himself in the hangar where Liara's personal fighter was being serviced. She was inside the cockpit, running system checks. "You're flying in the battle?" he asked. "Of course," she said without looking up. "I won't watch from a distance while my people fight." He studied her for a moment. "You've changed since the first day I met you." She glanced at him with a faint smile. "So have you. Back then you were just a stubborn human mercenary. Now, you're still stubborn, but in a way I don't mind." Before he could respond, the hangar alarm sounded, a short, repeating tone. A scout ship had returned, its hull scarred from weapons fire. The pilot staggered out and saluted. "The Syndrax, they're ahead of schedule," he reported. 2 days? No. They'll be at the belt in less than 1. That left them with almost no margin for error. Aaron and Liara exchanged a quick look. There would be no more time for preparation. The ambush would happen tomorrow, ready or not. The Veskar fleet moved through the darkness of space, their engines running at low power to avoid detection. The asteroid belt loomed ahead, a field of massive rocks drifting slowly in orbit around a dying star. The jagged shadows hid the mines and concealed the ships that had taken position hours earlier. Captain Aaron Hale stood on the command deck of the Veskar flagship, watching the tactical display. Red markers showed the Syndrax fleet's projected path, a straight line toward the capital, cutting directly through the belt. It was risky for them, but it was the shortest route, and they believed the Veskar were too weak to resist. Princess. Liara was at his side, wearing her flight armor. She would lead a squadron of fast interceptors once the trap was sprung. Her eyes stayed fixed on the display, but her voice was calm. If they realize too soon what we're doing, they'll turn around and escape. Then we don't give them that chance, Aaron replied. The first strike has to hit hard enough to make them think they're already losing. On the far side of the belt, Veskar engineers activated the cloaking fields around the mines. Each one floated silently between the asteroids, invisible. To sensors, reports came in from scouts. Enemy fleet detected. Estimated arrival in 23 minutes. The Veskar crew worked in near silence, tension hanging in the air. This was no longer a plan on a holographic map. The enemy was coming. King Zorath's voice came through the comms from the capital. Captain Hale, Princess Liara, you have command. May the stars guide you. Aaron gave the signal. All ships, hold position. Mines armed. Do not reveal yourselves until my mark. Minutes passed like hours. The asteroid belt seemed peaceful, almost lifeless, until the first Syndrax ships emerged from the dark. They were massive, shaped like black spears, their hulls bristling with weapons. Dozens of them moved in formation, their shields glowing faintly. The fleet entered the narrow pass. The asteroids closed in on either side, just as Aaron had predicted. Now, he said. The mines detonated in a chain reaction. Brilliant bursts of light tore through the darkness, ripping into the lead ships. Explosions bloomed across their hulls, and shock waves slammed into the vessels behind them. Syndrax formations broke apart instantly, confusion spreading through their ranks. "Strike wings, go!" Liara's voice cut through the comms as her squadron launched from hidden positions. The sleek Veskar interceptors darted between the asteroids, firing concentrated blasts into exposed engines and weapons arrays. The Syndrax responded quickly, returning fire. Asteroid fragments exploded into clouds of debris as energy bolts flashed. In every direction, Aaron coordinated the attack from the flagship. Group 2, swing around to the left corridor. Cut off their retreat. Group 3, push them deeper into the belt. Don't let them regroup. Veskar ships followed the commands, moving with precision. The enemy was powerful, but the tight quarters of the asteroid pass worked against them. Their largest battleships couldn't maneuver well, making them perfect targets. Liara's fighter weaved through the chaos, her targeting systems locking onto a Syndrax cruiser. She fired a pair of plasma torpedoes, striking its reactor. The ship erupted in a burst of light and fire, drifting helplessly as escape pods launched from its sides. "Another cruiser down," she reported, "but they're adapting. They're trying to clear a path through the belt." Aaron adjusted the plan. Detonate the secondary mines. Block their advance completely. The second wave of explosions cut off the Syndrax forward momentum, trapping their largest ships between two collapsed asteroid passages. But the Syndrax were far from defeated. Smaller enemy craft swarmed forward, trying to overwhelm the Veskar fighters. Liara found herself in a tight dogfight, spinning through asteroid shadows to shake off a pursuer. "Two on my tail," she called over comms. "Break right," Aaron ordered. A Veskar gunship emerged from cover, blasting the pursuing fighters to pieces. Hours seemed to pass in minutes. The battle was fierce, every move a balance between aggression and survival. Aaron could feel the pressure building. If the Syndrax found a weakness, they could still turn the fight. Suddenly, the tactical display lit up with new signals. Another enemy wave had entered the belt from the rear, reinforcements moving in. "Fast," Liara's voice came through, urgent. "If they link up with the trapped ships, this fight changes." Aaron's mind worked quickly. "Then we keep them apart. Shift our forward units to the choke point. Heavy ships, target the newcomers before they get close." The Veskar fleet moved with surprising coordination, blocking the reinforcements and striking hard at their lead ships. The confined space worked in their favor again, limiting the enemy's numbers in the fight at any one time. After another 30 minutes of brutal exchanges, the Syndrax formations began to break. Without the ability to regroup or escape, their commanders had no choice but to retreat the remaining ships. When the last enemy signal vanished from the tactical display, the war chamber on the flagship erupted in cheers. Liara's voice came through, tired but triumphant. "They're pulling back. We've won." Aaron exhaled slowly, watching the wreckage drift among the asteroids. "Not just one," he said quietly. "We've shown them Veskar space isn't theirs to take." From the capital, King Zorath's voice returned. "Captain Hale, Princess Liara, you have brought hope back to my people. Return home. We will speak of the next steps." As the fleet began its slow journey back, Aaron stood on the deck, looking out at the stars. The battle had been a success, but he knew the Syndrax wouldn't give up so easily. And deep inside, he also knew this was only the beginning. The fleet returned to Veskar Prime under the soft glow of the twin moons. The damage to their ships was visible: scorched hulls, missing armor plates, and repair drones already swarming over the most critical wounds. But the spirits of the crews were high. For the first time in years, they had struck a major blow against the Syndrax and survived to tell the tale. In the capital, the streets were lined with citizens. Word of the victory had spread faster than the fleet's return. Veskar banners flew from balconies, and crowds gathered near the spaceport, eager to catch sight of their heroes. Princess Liara's fighter touched down first. The canopy lifted, and she climbed out to a roar of cheers. She waved briefly before. Her eyes found her father standing at the base of the landing platform. King Zorath's face was unreadable, but his eyes shone with something rare: pride. Aaron stepped off the flagship's ramp behind her. The reaction to him was more mixed. Some in the crowd applauded, others whispered, unsure what to make of the human who had fought beside their princess. The Veskar guards watched him closely, but they didn't move to block his path. Zorath addressed the crowd, his deep voice carrying over the noise. "Today, we stand together not in defeat, but in victory. The Syndrax came to take what was ours, and we drove them back. This was not the work of one soldier, nor one ship, but of unity, Veskar and human, side by side." The people cheered again, though some hesitated at the mention of the human. That evening, a victory feast was held in the great hall of the palace. Long tables were set with shimmering platters of alien delicacies, and the air was filled with the soft music of crystal string instruments. The ministers were in attendance, though their moods varied. Some celebrated, others kept their expressions guarded. Aaron sat beside Liara at the king's table, aware of the curious glances sent his way. Zorath leaned toward him. "You did well today, Captain. You have earned the right to be heard here." "Thank you, Your Majesty," Aaron said simply. But the celebration did not last without tension. Halfway through the feast, Minister Varric rose to speak. "Your Majesty, while we all acknowledge the victory, we must also remember that the Syndrax fleet was only a portion of their power. They will return, and next time they will bring more." The room quieted. Varric's eyes shifted to Aaron. "And will we still rely on the strategies of an outsider? One who owes no loyalty to the Veskar throne?" Liara's voice was sharp. He owes loyalty to the lives he fought to protect, Veskar and human alike. Without him, this victory would not exist. Varric gave her a thin smile. And yet, Princess, trusting too much in an outsider may cost us more than this war. Zorath raised a hand to silence them. We will discuss our next moves in council. For tonight, let the people have their moment of hope. The feast continued, though the earlier warmth had cooled. Later, in the quiet of the palace gardens, Aaron walked beside Liara under the glow of the flame trees. The scent of their bright leaves filled the air. I take it Varric doesn't like me much, Aaron said dryly. Liara gave a faint laugh. He doesn't like anything he can't control. You fit that description perfectly. Aaron glanced at her. Your father, he's different from the other leaders I've met. He listens even when he's unsure. He's had to, Liara said softly. This war has forced him to change. He used to believe the Veskar could stand alone against any enemy. Now, he's learning otherwise. Before they could speak further, a guard approached, bowing slightly. Princess Captain, urgent message from the Defense Network. You are needed in the war chamber. Inside, the holographic display flickered to life. A scout ship's transmission played, showing grainy footage of a large Syndrax formation. The ships were bigger, heavily armored, and moving together in a tight wall. This is a retaliation force, one of the generals said grimly. They are not coming to raid. They are coming to destroy. Aaron studied the data. How long before they reach your borders? 5 days, the general replied. Zorath's gaze moved from the display to Aaron. You said before this was only the beginning. Tell me you have another plan. Aaron's mind was already working, piecing together the possibilities. If they're bringing their strongest ships, they'll be slower. That gives us time to hit them before they reach your space. Somewhere they can't bring their full strength to bear. Liara leaned forward. A preemptive strike? Aaron nodded. We go to them this time. Catch them before they're ready. Varric scoffed. Madness. We barely survived their smaller force, and you would have us attack a larger one in their own territory. Aaron looked at the king. If we wait for them to arrive, we fight on their terms. If we go now, we fight on ours. The choice is yours. Zorath was silent for a long moment, the weight of leadership heavy in his eyes. Finally, he spoke. Prepare the fleet. We strike before they can bring the war to our home. The room erupted, in mixed voices, some in support, others in protest, but the decision was made. As the meeting ended, Liara walked with Aaron toward the hangar. You realize this could be even more dangerous than the last battle, she said. Yeah, Aaron admitted. But that's the only way to win. They stopped at the edge of the hangar, watching crews load supplies onto the ships. The air was filled with the sound of engines warming and the faint vibration of the docking clamps releasing. In 5 days, the Syndrax would arrive. But in less than 2, the Veskar fleet, led by a king's daughter and a human captain, would be on their way to meet them, and this time, the fight would be far from home. 2 days later, the Veskar fleet slipped away from their homeworld under the cover of darkness. Their ships traveled in a wide formation, engines at minimal output to mask their approach. The target was deep in the outer systems, a narrow stretch of space between twin pulsars where navigation was treacherous. Captain Aaron Hale had chosen this place for one reason. The Syndrax's largest ships would struggle to maneuver here, just like in the asteroid belt. But this time, there would be no element of complete surprise. The Syndrax would be ready for a fight. On the flagship's bridge, Princess Liara stood beside Aaron, her armor sealed and ready. She had flown many missions before, but this one felt different. The stakes were no longer just survival. This was about ending the threat before it reached her people again. King Zorath's voice came over the fleet-wide channel. Veskar warriors, you fight today not only for your world, but for every life the Sindrax would crush under their rule. Let them learn that our spirit cannot be broken, the crew responded with a sharp, unified cry. An hour later, the enemy fleet appeared on sensors. The display filled with red markers, far more than in the previous battle. The lead ship was a massive dreadnought, its hull plated in dark alloy that absorbed most sensor scans. Dozens of cruisers and fighter wings surrounded it, moving like a shield. Aaron studied their formation. They're tighter than before. They've learned from last time. We'll need to break them apart before we can hit the dreadnought. How? Liara asked. Aaron pointed at the map. Here and here, gravitational shear points between the pulsars. If we can bait them into passing through, their formation will scatter. The plan was set. Veskar fast attack ships raced ahead, firing long-range torpedoes to draw the enemy into the shear zones. The Sindrax responded, chasing the smaller vessels, just as Aaron had hoped. Now we hit them, Aaron ordered. The Veskar heavy ships emerged from hiding, launching concentrated fire at the cruisers caught in the distorted space. Enemy shields flickered under the sudden assault. Liara's fighter squadron dove into the chaos, weaving between bursts of plasma fire. She targeted enemy engines, crippling ships rather than destroying them outright, slowing the enemy's ability to regroup. The dreadnought pushed forward, ignoring the smaller battles. Its massive cannons began charging, aimed directly at the Veskar flagship. Aaron's eyes narrowed. All forward shields to maximum, and get me firing control for the forward batteries. The flagship shuddered as the dreadnought's first blast struck, the shield's energy levels dropping dangerously. In return, the Veskar batteries unleashed a barrage of concentrated plasma at a single point on the dreadnought's hull. Small breach detected, the tactical officer reported. Not enough, Aaron muttered. Liara, we need that breach. Widened. On it, she replied. Her fighter swooped low over the dreadnought's surface, firing a pair of precision torpedoes into the damaged section. Explosions tore open the armor, exposing glowing inner machinery. All heavy ships. Focus fire on that breach, Aaron commanded. The combined assault lit the void with bursts of light and heat. The dreadnought's outer decks began to buckle, but the Sindrax fought back fiercely. Enemy fighters swarmed Liara's squadron, and the flagship took another direct. Hit! Alarms blaring as damage reports came in. Captain, our port engines are failing, the chief engineer called out. Aaron gritted his teeth. Divert all non-essential power to engines and shields. We're not pulling back now. Liara's voice came through again, strained but steady. The breach is almost at their reactor. Core, one more run should do it. Do it, Aaron said. She dived again, her fighter shaking under enemy fire. A missile clipped her wing, but she kept control long enough to release the final torpedoes. They struck true. The dreadnought's reactor went critical, a blinding explosion tearing the massive ship apart from within. The shockwave ripped through the battlefield, sending smaller ships spinning out of formation. The remaining Sindrax forces, seeing their flagship destroyed, began to retreat. Veskar ships pursued just far enough to ensure they would not regroup nearby. Cheers erupted across the Veskar comm channels. King Zorath's voice returned, steadier now. To all ships, you have done what many thought impossible. Return home. The threat is broken. On the bridge, Aaron let out a slow breath. Liara's fighter docked minutes later, and she stepped onto the deck with her helmet under her arm. They exchanged a quiet look, the kind only shared by people who had faced death together and survived. The journey back to Veskar Prime was long but peaceful. As they entered orbit, the capital's skies lit up with bright trails of welcome, the people's way of honoring returning warriors. In the throne room, Zorath greeted them both before the assembled council. My daughter has brought me many victories in her time, but this was different. Today we stood with An ally no Veskar would have imagined. A human who fought not for his world, but for ours. He turned to Aaron. Captain Hale, you have my gratitude and the gratitude of my people. You will always have a place here. Aaron inclined his head. And if the Sindrax ever come again, you'll have my ship at your side. The council, even Minister Varric, stood in respect. That night, as celebrations filled the capital, Liara stood beside Aaron on the same balcony where they had once looked out over a city filled with worry. Now, it was alive with light and music. "You've changed my people's future," she said quietly. Aaron shook his head. "We changed it together. And under the twin moons of Veskar Prime, the alien princess and the human captain knew that. The war had ended not just in victory, but in a bond that would outlast the battles.